Okay, everyone, we have an exciting session with us. For those of you who have never seen or heard, I guess it's going to be more hearing and looking at his slides, Bob Marshall. Bob is a great trainer. Definitely, as with everyone, connect with him on LinkedIn and check out his site at themarshallplan.org. Bob has done a gazillion trainings. Can't even go through the full bio because he's done NAPS, he's done all the associations. He's got great handouts that you guys are going to be able to download. And really, Bob brings a great strategic approach to his topics. And today, Bob's going to talk about negotiating techniques which are applicable to everyone, whether you're independent recruiters, you own a firm, you're on the contract side of the business, and these are just great, wonderful tips that should all, help you maximize your return. So without further ado, I turn the session over to Mr. Bob Marshall. Bob, it's yours.
All right, Neil, thanks a lot. I think Neil likes to have me on these because he and I talk about the same speed. So hopefully you'll be able to follow. I am going to do a session today called Negotiating Techniques, and I think it's for everyone. And Neil wanted me to make sure that I talk about recruiters, independent recruiters, people that do contracting, temp to perm, the whole grouping. And so my big preamble here is, if you're working in a certain area or it seems like I say the word recruiter or whatever, try to just focus on where or how that would work for me in what I do. And I've trained contracting in the past. I know it's different in some aspects, but with negotiation, I believe you guys can use all these things. So that's going to be kind of my endeavor today, is to make this broad-based and kind of give you an overview. I know in 45 minutes to an hour, we can't talk about everything that deals with negotiating techniques, but I think some important things, and I think that's what I want to go over with you today. A while back, a group came to me, a group of tenured recruiters, and I am known as kind of a nuts and bolts type trainer. I'm very, very pragmatic, very basic oriented. And they said, well, that's fine about marketing and recruiting and all the things that you train us, but could you come up with a more advanced technique presentation, maybe a presentation geared primarily for a tenured person as opposed to the basics? And they suggested negotiation. So I agreed, and so at that point, I became the student, and I went out, visited the library, the bookstores, picked up a couple of books on negotiation, and one of my favorite books, and there's a ton of books on negotiation, by the way, but one of my favorites was a book called You Can Negotiate Anything by Herb Cohen. And the presentation I'm going to give you today is based a lot on that book. I also picked out an interesting idea from a book called Secrets of a Corporate Headhunter by John Warham, and he talks about something called sighticements. We'll get into that later, and that's another area that I thought was really important as I was studying to do this presentation. So what you're going to hear today is a more advanced technique. It deals with negotiation. We can all use that, and based on the book by Herb Cohen. Now, what is the definition? There's basically three definitions of negotiation, and here they are. Negotiation is a field of knowledge and endeavor that focuses on gaining favor of people from whom we want things. Number two, also negotiation is the use of information and power to affect behavior within a web of tension. I like that one a lot. And three, that basically negotiation is made up of three critical or crucial elements: power, time, and information. So what we're going to do today is we're going to cover those areas and give you a little preamble first, and then we'll cover power, we'll cover time, we'll cover information, and that should give us kind of a good overview as far as negotiation, and hopefully you'll like it. Okay, here in the preamble are some of the things that are important to cover, maybe 5 points in this preamble. Number one, don't be too quick to understand or prove your intellect at the outset of an encounter. Watch your listen-talk ratio. Learn to ask questions even when you think you might know the answers. Remember the famous quote by Rudyard Kipling, who, when he was asked why he was such a great author, responded, "I had 6 guides that taught me everything I knew. They were what and when and where and how and why and who." All the starts of open-ended questions. Furthermore, if you approach others asking for help, it tends to set the climate for a mutually beneficial relationship. At the very least, you'll cause the other side to make an investment of time that ultimately accrues to your advantage. So help is a very powerful word, and having the ability to train around the country and overseas, I notice it's applicable in Europe and the places I've been there, as well as here in the United States. So that's number one. Number two, for an ultimatum, like a takeaway close that you're all probably familiar with, to succeed, it must be delayed until the end. At that point, time has been expended, and thereby an investment has been made. It should be non-adversarial. It should be made in a business-like manner. You'll use phrases like "my hands are tied," which is one of my favorite ones, great sales expression, or "there's no other way I can go," and you'll have a limited menu, choices with limits and parameters. In our business, we use an alternative choice close a lot of times to offer both the hiring manager and the candidate a limited menu. Within reason, you can get whatever you want if you're aware of your options, if you test your assumptions, if you take shrewdly calculated risks based on solid information, and if you believe you have power. So that's the second. Third, in the preamble, never enter any negotiations without options. This is sometimes called the principle of requisite variety. Know where you're going. You know, after all, you're like an Indian guide. I often say this to people, that you know how to get across the lake, but each trip across the lake may take you on a different path. But at least you know where you're starting and you know where you're going to end up. So you want to have that flexibility. You don't want to have an objection and throw your hands in the air and say, shoot, I don't know what to do now. So keep in mind that the principle of requisite variety means that the person in any closed loop system, whether it's electronics, human communication, the individual who possesses the most options always controls the outcome. So I often say to people, be noted for your flexibility, because flexibility will get you to where you want to be. Number four, people regard with awe anything printed. I'll get to that a little bit later as well. Therefore, our firms, whether you're in contracting, whether you're search, all of our forms are pre-printed. We send out fee schedules and fee agreements and arranged interview slips and job order forms, and we close with invoice worksheet. But just remember that in number four here, anything that is printed takes on greater significance. And number five, tap into the power of legitimacy in our society. Care, but never care too much. Keep in mind that involvement begets commitment, and commitment begets power. Try to predict the other party's needs, and it's critical to remember that logic in and of itself will rarely influence people. Of course, they must understand you, and you should provide them with overwhelming evidence, but the key is that they must believe that you will meet their existing needs and desires. A great sales trainer, Cavett Robert, if you ever want to just look up some great quotes and some great information on the internet, it's Cavett, C-A-V-E-T-T, Robert, R-O-B-E-R-T. One of my favorite quotes of all time is his, and he says that people are more moved by the depth of your conviction than by the height of your logic. And I think that's very important. To try to out-logic people just doesn't work. So that's kind of my little preamble to kind of set the stage for what we're going to cover in today's presentation. And next will be the powers, and this is divided into 14 different powers, and I'll go over them fairly quickly. The first power that we come to is the power of competition. It's important to let hiring managers know that you work with different companies, and it's important that the candidates know that you work with different candidates. We need to instill in both sides the knowledge that they are not the only fish in the sea. Instill in them that time is of the essence, and if they are not interested in each other, that's fine, because we have other candidates and we have other companies. What we're after are quick decisions. A decision is a yes, no, subsequent interview. No other options are possible. So we want to let sometimes I say to my people, tell them that you're good fast. That if they need something fast, then they need you. If they don't need something fast, then they probably don't need you. But you're more effective that way. Second, the power of legitimacy. And here comes the printing part again. Anything printed takes on greater significance. In fact, we sometimes call this the principle of the big printer in the sky. Things that are printed tend to be non-negotiable. In our business, we have send out slips, confirmation notices. Whether you do contracting, whether you do search, you all have the forms that you use. These all need to be printed, and anything that is printed is going to be very impactful to the other side, especially if they can see it. When you're out there sitting in their office taking information and they see your forms, you'll have power with printed documents. Next, the power of risk-taking. In our business, the power of risk-taking usually ties in with the closes that we use. There are 16 different closes. In fact, if Neil ever wants me to come back again, I can do a talk, probably take an hour, on the 16 different closes. But risk-taking, you are risk-taking when you're doing closes, but you're really trying to get a decision, right? It's important to realize that we are salespeople and we should be constantly aware of the ABCs of salesmanship. ABCs meaning always be closing. One of the strongest closes we use is the takeaway close. We consider it a strong close because it creates a win-win situation. And all we're doing in a business-like way, not being mean, is determining where there is an interest, where there is no interest, and closing those deals quicker, thereby making more placements and freeing up our time so that we can get on with more and better deals. It's important to remember that when you have a lot of items in search, we call it a hot sheet. In contracting, you follow the things you have out there, the people you have out on assignment. It's much easier to implement strong closes if you have a lot of things on your hot sheet. If you have 10 interviews, let's say, in the works on your hot sheet, and you do a takeaway close and you lose a deal that you were going to lose anyway, you've only lost 10% of your business. If you only have 2 things on your hot sheet and you lose 1 in a takeaway situation, you've now lost 50% of your business. And heaven forbid, if you only have 1 thing and you do a takeaway close, if you're brave enough to do that, and you lose it, you're out of business. You've just lost all of it. So another reason why to have a lot of things cooking at the same time. So it's why we have a difficult time training recruiters to do some of the stronger posturing type of closes when they only have a couple of things on their hot sheet. In fact, most recruitment managers would agree, and these are in the recruitment side, that you need at least 5 fulls or 10 splits on the hot sheet at any given point in time to even have a shot for a placement. So in other words, whether you're contracting, whether you're search, have a lot of activity going at the same time, and that mitigates some of the risk. And then we can do the what-if close, the non-overlapping close, that, and I can talk about this later, or if we do closes, 9 times out of 10 we'll get a counteroffer in your favor. Okay, next, the power of commitment. It's important that mutual cooperation is exchanged before negotiation can proceed. In our business, we talk about agenda closing and agenda selling. In other words, what you want to do is get mutual exchanges of cooperation and to set up a scenario that can be closed against after the interview takes place. Before the interview takes place, you have to set up these parameters of commitment, so you let them know ahead of time what's expected of them. If you don't get mutual cooperation from both sides prior to the interview, you've constructed an open-ended situation and you have nothing to close against. Indeed, after an interview, you might not ever be able to get back to either side over the phone or through personal visits, and we know that after an interview, that's the closest both sides are going to be towards coming together, and so that's why we want to talk as soon as possible after the interview takes place. If you've ever wondered, why do they keep talking about making that call quickly? That's why. All right, next, the power of expertise. It's important to realize that as recruiters, as consultants, as contractors, we are the experts at what we do. It's important to understand that hiring managers, the people we clear fees with, are really not hiring authorities. We use that term because we have to clear a fee with somebody. Usually hiring authorities that use recruiters are in a tough situation and they must bring somebody on board quickly. They're actually paying us to circumvent the time factor. These people are usually supervisory authorities who hire occasionally when the need is dramatic. They use a recruiter when the need is beyond dramatic often, and they don't understand what's involved in the hiring process. They don't understand what a minimum of 5 weeks is usually necessary to recruit a candidate, interview them, make them the offer, they give notice and all those kind of things. So you are the expert no matter what you do, and you need to relay that to the person you're dealing with. Often I have my people say, let me explain to you how I work when we start a relationship, because you are the expert, and that way we can set up a non-confrontive situation, as opposed to saying, how do you work, and then having them tell you a bunch of things that you can't agree with. It's called consultative versus confrontive selling. Next, the power of the knowledge of needs. You need to know the specific issues and the demands of the other side. These are usually in the open, and if you're a halfway decent listener, you'll find out what the specific issues and demands are. You'll also need to know the real needs of the other side. Keep in mind that the real needs of the other side are usually secret. What does the other side really need? Be a good listener. Be sure that you can read between the lines so that you can really isolate those true needs and true desires. And a lot of times, just by being an effective listener, that can take place. The power of investment. Time, money, or energy must be invested before we can proceed with some of the closes we use, especially getting back to the takeaway close. There is a direct ratio between the extent of an investment and the willingness to compromise. That's why takeaway closes or some of the stronger power closes don't work at the front end of any negotiation. Nothing has been expended yet. No time, no money, no energy. Be sure to cover more flexible items first in any negotiated sequence. Then get back to the less flexible items. Use the phrase, my hands are tied. This has tremendous impact on any negotiating sequence. For instance, if they are intransigent, you say, gee, I'd love to be able to help you. I understand you only want to pay 25%, but in that regard, my hands are really tied. I tell you what, let's get on with some of the other things we need to talk about now and revisit the fee later. So now we're going to get some expenditure of time. When we talk about the marketing presentation, we want to close on the expertise that the candidate has that ties in with the job they'll be doing. Now, they may not have one or two items that the company would like, but we're not going to close on those until later. But we are going to close on them because selling is merely telling the truth in an attractive manner. What we want to do is get the investment of time by closing on the candidate's qualifications that directly match the position first. Later, we can go back telling the truth in an attractive manner and cover the items that the candidate doesn't match as well. At this late stage, we can then quote my favorite CFO, who used to say, if this candidate is 80% qualified, jump all over him, because in this world, no one is 100% matched. That person just doesn't exist. And we often talk here about Pareto's principle, letting our people know, our hiring managers know, that if a candidate's 80% right, we guys consider that 100% match. And the same thing with the candidate. If this company is 80% correct, you should consider yourself the luckiest candidate in the world, because there are no 100% matches. There are no 100% marriages. So sometimes the candidate or the companies are being unrealistic. Next, the power of rewarding or punishing. The perception that I can and might help you or hurt you gives me muscle. The actual reality is immaterial. In our business, it has been said by some hiring managers that they don't really want us stealing their people. While that idea might be nice to contemplate, the reality of the situation is that we can't steal people anyway who are happy, well appreciated, making good money. In fact, there's an interesting and progressive example from W.R. Grace, who I used to work with, that said they always wanted their people looking for a better position for two reasons. That first, if somebody wants to look and he and she is not happy with W.R. Grace, they may find a better opportunity and they get rid of a kind of a disgruntled employee. And if they don't find something as good as W.R. Grace, they come back as a better employee. So either way, W.R. Grace contended it was a win-win situation for them. Just keep in mind that no one will ever negotiate with you in any significant way unless they're convinced that you can and might help them or can and might hurt them. In an adversarial relationship, if you think I might help you or hurt you, I should never diffuse your perception of my power unless I get something in return, such as a concession on your part or a repositioning on your part that truly benefits our relationship or me. I've sometimes heard that where a hiring manager will say, well, I don't want you stealing my people, or words to that effect, and you hear recruiters say, oh, no, I never would do that. Well, based on the power of rewarding and punishing, I would rather say something like, oh, they say that about us, but really what I wanted to talk about. So I've not said I won't, and I've not said I will. I'm just letting that thought move around in their brain, and then I'm going to get onto something else because I never want to diffuse that perception. If that's their perception, I'll let that be their perception. Okay, next, the power of identification. Emphasize your proven track record as a company, an organization, or as a recruiter. Gain their cooperation, loyalty, and their respect. Speak to their needs and empathize, but make sure they can identify with you and your organization. And so we let them know what we bring to the table. I often use the setting the value of an employee using the multiple of compensation method. And so you say to a hiring manager, let's say Transamerica, the insurance people with the pyramid out in San Francisco, when they develop Keyman insurance policies, they use the multiple of compensation method to value the policies. So if a person is making $100,000 a year, and let's say we use a 5 times multiple, which is very reasonable, a person that is making $100,000 a year, an employee, is going to bring you, Mr. Hiring Authority, 5 times that salary in value to your company. So they're going to bring $500,000 worth of value each year they're with you. I'm going to get my fee. Let's say I charge 30% of realistic first-year earnings. I'm going to get $30,000 one time. You're going to get $500,000 in value every single year that person stays with you. So tell me that what we do is not valuable for you and your company. There's other ways to deal with that works really well. But anyway, something like that. You can Google Transamerica multiple of compensation method, and it explains all that. Next, the power of morality. Is their behavior for the good of mankind? Ask if their behavior is fair and right. I love that. When they question a fee, you can get on your moral soapbox. Ask, is that right? Is that fair? When they ask for a resume, ask, should we jeopardize this candidate's career? What might be the repercussions if someone in the candidate's current company learns that our candidate is on the market? Should we get this candidate's name out when he's currently happy, well appreciated, working, making good money? You never can tell what might happen that could destroy his current situation. We might put him into a tough predicament. Is that right? Is that fair? Is that equitable? All powerful words dealing with the power of morality. Next, the power of precedent. Don't agree when they say we've always done it this way. Use a similar situation close. Explain what happens or what has happened in the past with one of the situations where you were involved. And all of us have these histories that we can go back to. If it's corporate policy, i.e. a resume is required, only pay 20% fee, etc., you say that's fine. If it's corporate policy, all I need to do is to talk to the head of the corporation, determine with the head of the corporation if we can change the policy in this situation, then get back to you. If we can't change it, then I won't get back to you. But at least I can go, and I have somebody I can go to there. Too often, we recruiters penetrate a company at the wrong levels. Now, I know we have to, especially in contracting, it may vary, but often we penetrate at the level just above our candidate's position. We think that makes sense, but it doesn't. Penetrate at the highest levels because you will be treated at the level you penetrate. Rookie recruiters don't have a problem speaking at the highest level. If you say to them, call the president CEO, okay, that's what they think they need to do. And so they don't really know any better. It's only after we have tenure, maybe 6 months or so, that we start going lower on the organizational chart to present our candidates. I consider this the suffering recruiter / artist syndrome. We're making so much money that we feel like we should be suffering, and so we penetrate at levels where suffering will be greatest. It's easiest to talk at the highest level, or the assistant to that person. They will refer you. That's fine. Have them refer you. If there's ever any problems rather lower on the organizational chart, you go right back up to where you penetrated originally, and you always have access at that level. Retainer recruiters do this all the time, and they would never go lower than the C level. Okay, next, the power of persistence. This isn't anything, but you must be tenacious to be successful. Educate your hiring managers as to how you work before they educate you as to how they work. Remember, this is a race, and the fastest person wins. Next, the power of persuasive capacity. Again, the quote rather, people are more moved by the depth of your conviction than by the height of your logic. And isn't it funny how we constantly try to out-logic people? We give them feature presentations, and we never get anywhere. You talk about 17 features, and then they want to think about it. Stop trying to outlogic people. Use the tone of persuasiveness in your voice. You need to understand their needs. You need to have overwhelming evidence to satisfy those needs, but they have to believe through the emotion you exhibit that you can satisfy those needs, because people can't resist an emotion. They will copy a positive emotion, and they'll also copy a negative emotion. Next, the power of attitude, kind of what we just talked about. It's important to care, but not too much. You need to have a strong attitude, pretend you have $1 million in your pocket all of the time, and have a very matter-of-fact, business-like sense when you go out into the marketplace. Don't sound desperate. Recruiters don't do well when they sound desperate or when they're tired or hungry or depressed or sick, etc. A strong positive attitude comes across the phone and especially in person, and you want to have that at all times. So those are the 14 powers. I know that's a lot of them, and I tried to go over quickly. Hopefully you got the notes on that, and I'm sure Neil will give you the recording. And now we're going to cover two of the other elements. The first one is time of the major elements. There is a quote, "As long as you get there before it's over, you're never late." Keep in mind the most significant concession behavior will always occur close to the deadline. I must know your deadline, but you mustn't know mine. No matter what the hiring manager says to you, especially when the job order has been qualified as to having tremendous urgency, every other side has a deadline. They always do. So you need to know their deadline, but they must never know your deadline. Time can favor either side depending on circumstances. Regardless of these interim interpretations, which may affect the negotiation climate, some of the observations already made are worth repeating. Number one, since most concession behavior and settlements will occur at or even beyond the deadline, be patient. True strength often calls for the ability to sustain the tension without flight or fight. Learn to keep your automatic defense responses under control, remain calm, but keep alert for the favorable moment to act. As a general rule, patience pays. It may be that the thing to do when you don't know what to do is to do nothing. Of course, this is easier when you have lots of candidates and hiring managers in the closing sequence, another reason why we want you to have a lot of activity. Number two, in an adversary negotiation, your best strategy is not to reveal your true deadline to the other side. Always keep in mind that since deadlines are the product of a negotiation, they are more flexible than most people realize. Never blindly follow a deadline, but evaluate the benefits and detriments that will ensue as you approach or go beyond the brink. And three, the other side, cool and serene as they may appear, always has a deadline. Most often, the tranquility they display outwardly masks a great deal of stress and pressure. Number four, precipitous action should only be taken when it's guaranteed to be in your advantage. Generally speaking, you cannot achieve the best outcome quickly. You can achieve it only slowly and perseveringly. Very often, as you approach the deadline, a shift of power will occur, presenting a creative solution, even a turnaround by the other side. The people may not change, but with the passage of time, circumstances do. So that's a little blurb on time. Next, information. Get the information early when it's easiest to come by. Amen to that. The sooner you get the information, the better off you're going to be. It's always the later that we go, it's when it's the hardest to get. Remember, negotiation isn't an event, it's a process through which you work. In most instances, there's more to gathering information than playing humble and merely saying, help me. Generally, you have to give information in order to get some in return. You gradually give selective information for these three reasons. Now, Cohen in his book says, number one, it's more blessed to give than to receive. Number two, perceptive people won't communicate with you beyond the chit-chat level until reciprocal risks take place. They won't share information with you until you have shared some commensurate information with them. To persuade someone to advance to another square, you have to advance to another square, seemingly on an even-steven basis with their revelations. This is mutual risk-taking behavior, the deliberate building of a two-way trust. And number three, when you give carefully worded and controlled information during the process stage, you hope to lower the expectation level of the other side. When you're getting the information, be aware of indirect or unintentional cues. Sometimes it's considered the Freudian slip, things that just happen to slip out. These might be verbal cues, the tone or the emphasis they use when they're talking, or behavioral cues, the body language, the tenseness or the relaxing posture, the arms folded across the chest, or often at the open rather at their sides. Be aware of these indirect cues. And remember this, and I think this is critical. The initial no is a reaction, not a position. Okay? The initial no is a reaction, not a position. As Cohen states, people who react negatively to your proposal simply need time to evaluate it and adjust their thinking. With the passage of sufficient time and repeated efforts on your part, almost every no can be transformed into a maybe and eventually a yes. And I think it's important that you all know that a no is a reaction. Having 3 daughters, growing up with 3 daughters, I remember daughter number 3 coming to me and saying she wanted to spend the night at Jackie's house. And Jackie was kind of a loose cannon, so I said no. Now my daughter, knowing that was a reaction, not a position, said, well, are you sure? And then I would say, well, when do you need to get over there? All right, well, obviously my no was just a reaction, not a position, because now I'm asking for how she's going to get over there. And this would go through until she finally got the yes that she was after. Well, it's the same thing in what we do. Maybe our fee is too high, and we say, no, we would never pay that. The next time you say 30% of realistic first-year earnings, let's say, they say, well, that's pretty high. The next time you say it, it's like, you charge 30%. Well, each time you say it, it's becoming more and more acceptable. It's just the first time they've never heard it before. So another reason why we want to talk with 2 people over and over again. Okay, negotiating styles. There are a couple of negotiating styles that are important to at least cover, since we're going to cover negotiation. And the first one it's called the Soviet style. Actually, they're not around as a country anymore, so I guess it's the Russian style. It's a win-lose style. When one side wins, the other side loses. So here is the stance that the Soviet negotiator would have, and tell me if this doesn't sound familiar with some of the people you've dealt with in the past. Number 1, an extreme initial position that always starts with tough demands or ridiculous offers that affect the other side's expectation level. That's number 1. Number 2, limited authority. The negotiators have little or no authority to make any concessions. Number 3, emotional tactics. They get red-faced, they raise their voices, they act exasperated and horrified that they're being taken advantage of. Occasionally they will stalk out of the meeting in a huff. Number 4, adversary concessions by you are viewed as weakness, not strength. Should you give in and concede something to them, they're unlikely to reciprocate. Number 5, they are stingy in their concessions. They delay making any concession, and when they finally do, it reflects only a minuscule change in their position. And number 6, they ignore deadlines. They tend to be patient and act as though time is of no significance. Too often, recruiters structure this win-lose position. Keep in mind that when you win on these, you really do lose. You may make one placement with a company, but never do business with that company again. So what we want to do, and here's the second style, is change this by moving to what's called a mutual satisfaction style. In contrast, what you want is the second style of negotiation stance called the win-win, or the mutual satisfaction type of arrangement. There are many situations in which the needs of the protagonists are not really in opposition. If the focus shifts from defeating each other to defeating the problem, everyone can benefit. There is a need in the company. There is an opening. That's the problem, not the fee agreement. In fact, I was just speaking with one of my students this morning on this very thing. We have now all of a sudden focused on the fee agreement, and it's a peripheral issue to getting the person placed with the company. So we need to come back to where the major issue is, and that's making the placement. So it's that the fee is not the problem, not a fee arrangement, not whether we send resumes or not. What you want to do is shift the focus to defeating the problem, not each other. In this way, there can be acceptable gains for both sides. It's also important to remember not to concentrate too much on the fee. We concentrate on money because we want to know rather, the realistic first year earning so that we can calculate our fee on that number. But there are other elements that make up a compensation package that make it mutually beneficial to both sides. These things might have nothing to do with money, by the way. John Warham, in his book, it's called Secrets of a Corporate Headhunter, calls these items psyticements, which is a blend of psychic enticements. For example, after a candid give and take discussion, we set up a situation in which the candidate who wanted 80 will only receive 70 in salary, but receive compensation in other forms. In fact, the final accord could call excuse me, for the candidate to receive the equivalent of more than 25,000 in terms of a company car, an expense account, a country club membership, profit sharing, a free vested contribution to their retirement fund, a low interest loan, free medical plan, subsidized dental plan. Do those exist anymore? Free life insurance, a hospitalization plan, additional time off, extra week of vacation, control over their own budget, a new office with a window, designated parking slot. I mean, this goes on and on. There's so many different things that can be in enticements. It's not just money. Maybe 2 inches of additional foam under their carpeting so that they can spring about. And the company purchase of their old home. And I mean, hot tub, trip to convention to Hawaii. These then comprise a partial list of enticements of which you need to be aware that you can use to put the salary packages together. So, in conclusion, in keeping in mind with the win-win situation, you see the problems from their point of view to qualify the objections that come up, build trust in this relationship. Number two, look to sharing and creating solutions, gain their commitment, use the if I, will you trade-off kind of close, and manage conflict by managing opposition. So, in conclusion, and I know I went over this quickly and I know I talk fast, but I want to give you an overview for negotiation technique. Keep in mind the definitions of the three crucial elements of power, time, and information. Try to avoid the Soviet style, the winning at all costs type of negotiation stance, where one party wins and the other party loses. Strive for mutual satisfying agreements, a win-win type of negotiation. If you do this, focusing on the problem and not on each other, and developing this kind of win-win negotiation type of technique, not only will you make more placements, have more success in whatever you do, but also more money will accrue to you and your family. Alas, you will make multiple placements, do multiple business with the same company, and that, in the final analysis, I believe is one of the secrets of the superstars. So that's what I have. Hopefully those of you that do contracting, temp to perm, those kind of things, can take what I've said today and maybe change a word here or there, use the things that fit into your business. As I often say when I do presentations like this, not everybody does everything. Pick some of these elements that make sense to you. Maybe taking no as a reaction, not a condition. Maybe that's one you need to do. And then work on it for 30 days, for a month. And then it will become second nature to you. Don't try it for 1 or 2 days because it's not going to work if you only do it that way. So take the things you can use, change some of the verbiage that fits what you do, whether it's contracting, search, or whatever, and I am sure that you will be able to use this information and increase your productivity. That's it for me.
All right, awesome. Thank you. And I mean, I couldn't agree more about the whole theme that you had with conviction. I mean, all of us trainers talk about that all the time. And you know, everyone out there, you have to just feel super comfortable in not feeling right like you're fighting or that you're doing anything wrong. And just the way that you go about it and everything that Bob mentioned is what's going to get you the higher markups, margins, fees, etc. So real good stuff. Don't forget, if you want to have access to this for an extended period of time and look at replays, if you want to be able to download you know, all of the forms and documents in PowerPoint, make sure you click on the upgrade button on the main page of virtualrecruitingsummit.com. It's a great cheap price for you to really build up your training library. And That's it. So thanks so much. And thank you very, very much, Bob, for your time. Great call.
Welcome.